Let me ask you a painful question. How many times have you promised yourself, this time will be different, and then watched yourself quit again? Not because you're incapable, not because you're lazy, but because deep down, you stopped trusting yourself. See, the hardest part isn't failing. The hardest part is looking in the mirror and wondering, why don't I believe my own word anymore? And that right there, that quiet disappointment you don't talk about, is why motivation feels gone. If that's you, don't tune out, because today isn't about hype. It's about getting you back. Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Motivation is a liar. Motivation shows up when it feels like it and disappears when life gets uncomfortable. If motivation was enough, everybody would be successful, but they are not, because winners don't wait to feel ready. They move because they decided. Now listen closely. If you have no motivation right now, I don't want you to change your life. I don't want you to chase big goals. I don't want you to find your passion. I want you to do one thing for 7 days straight. Here it is. Keep one small promise to yourself every day, no matter how you feel. That's it. Not 10 promises, not a complicated plan, one promise. It could be 15 minutes of focused work, reading 10 pages, writing 1 page, exercising for 10 minutes, learning 1 skill daily. The size doesn't matter, the consistency does, because the real problem isn't laziness. The real problem is broken self-trust. Every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, and you don't, you teach yourself that your word doesn't matter, and when you don't trust yourself, motivation dies. But here's the secret. The moment you start keeping promises to yourself, something powerful happens. Your identity begins to shift. You stop saying, I'm trying, and you start becoming someone who follows through. Confidence isn't a feeling. Confidence is evidence, and evidence is built through repeated action. Let me say this clearly. Discipline beats motivation every time. Because discipline doesn't care how you feel. And when you do that one thing for day 1, something happens. Day 2 feels easier. Day 3 creates momentum. Day 4 builds pride. Day 5 builds belief. Day 6 builds strength. Day 7 proves something to you. You are in control. Not your mood, not your past, not your circumstances. 7 days won't just change your habits, it will change how you see yourself. And once your self-image changes, your results have no choice but to follow. So don't wait for motivation. Create momentum, pick the one thing, lock it in, do it for 7 days straight, and watch what happens. Next, motivation is unreliable because it depends on how you feel, and feelings change every day. Some days you wake up excited, some days tired, some days discouraged, and if your progress depends on those emotions, your results will always be inconsistent. Motivation shows up when things are going well, but it disappears the moment resistance, boredom, or fear shows up. That's why so many people start strong and quit quietly, because they built their progress on a feeling instead of a structure. Systems create results because systems don't care about your mood. A system is simply a decision made in advance about what you will do, when you will do it, and how you will do it, regardless of how you feel in the moment. When you have a system, you remove negotiation from your life. You stop asking, do I feel like it today? And start living by, this is just what I do. That shift alone separates amateurs from professionals. Motivation is reactionary, but systems are intentional. Motivation waits for inspiration. Systems create momentum. When you rely on motivation, you're constantly restarting. When you rely on systems, progress becomes automatic. Even on low energy days, the system carries you forward, and over time, those small, consistent actions compound into massive results. Here's the truth. Most people miss. Successful people aren't more motivated than everyone else. They're more committed to their systems. They don't win because they feel like it. They win because they built a process they trust. And once a system is in place, motivation becomes a bonus, not a requirement. The one thing that changes everything is keeping a daily promise to yourself, because every promise you keep strengthens your self-trust, and every promise you break weakens it. Most people think their problem is a lack of discipline, but the real issue is they no longer believe their own word. They've told themselves too many times, I'll start tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. Over time, that quiet pattern teaches the mind that intention means nothing without follow-through. A daily promise doesn't need to be big to be powerful. In fact, it should be small enough that excuses don't stand a chance. The power isn't in the size of the action, it's in the certainty that it gets done. When you choose one simple, non-negotiable action and complete it every day, you begin rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who finishes. Each day you keep that promise. You send a signal to your identity. I do what I say I'm going to do. That signal compounds. Confidence grows quietly, not from hype or praise, but from evidence. And the fastest way to create evidence is repetition. When your brain sees consistent follow-through, resistance loses its power and action becomes normal instead of forced. This is why one promise is enough. One daily win creates momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief changes behavior, and behavior repeated long enough changes your life. Identity shifts before circumstances change because your life is always moving in the direction of who you believe you are. Long before results show up on the outside, a decision is made on the inside about what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you repeat. Most people try to change their circumstances without changing their identity, and that's why they keep ending up in the same place with different plans. When your identity changes, your choices change automatically. You stop forcing yourself to act and start acting in alignment with who you see yourself as. A person who believes I'm disciplined doesn't struggle to be consistent. They simply do what disciplined people do. A person who believes I'm unreliable will sabotage progress even when opportunities appear. The behavior always follows the belief. That's why small, repeated actions are so powerful. Every time you show up when you said you would, you're casting a vote for a new version of yourself. You're not just completing a task, you're reinforcing an identity. Over time, those votes stack up, and the old story loses its grip. You no longer need external motivation because your actions are now driven by self-image. Circumstances eventually have no choice but to respond. Opportunities align with identity. Results reflect belief. But it always starts internally. Change who you believe you are, and the world will begin to treat you differently because you'll begin to treat yourself differently first. Discipline compounds faster than talent because talent gives you potential, but discipline turns potential into progress. Talent may get you noticed early, but without discipline, it fades the moment consistency is required. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't need natural ability to win. It only needs repetition. Small actions done daily may look insignificant at first, but over time they stack up and outperform raw ability that isn't maintained. Talent is exciting, but it's unpredictable. It works when conditions are perfect, when energy is high, and when pressure is low. Discipline works on ordinary days, on tired days, and on days when no one is watching. That's why disciplined people pass talented people quietly. They keep showing up while others rely on bursts of brilliance. What looks like overnight success is usually years of disciplined behavior finally becoming visible. Discipline compounds because it builds skill, confidence, and momentum all at once. Each disciplined action makes the next one easier. Habits form, resistance drops, and progress accelerates. Talent doesn't compound unless it's used, but discipline guarantees use. Over time, the disciplined person becomes skilled, and the skilled person becomes exceptional. In the long run, discipline creates its own talent. What starts as effort turns into mastery, and mastery turns into results that talent alone could never sustain. Momentum is created, not found, because it doesn't appear before you act. It shows up after you move. Most people wait for a surge of energy, clarity, or confidence before they begin. But momentum doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to action. The first step is almost always uncomfortable, heavy, and awkward, but it's also the step that starts everything. When you take action without motivation, you break inertia. That single act sends a signal to your mind and body that movement has begun. Once movement starts, resistance weakens. What felt hard at the beginning feels manageable once you're in motion. This is why starting is the hardest part, not continuing. Momentum grows through consistency, not intensity. You don't need massive effort, you need repeated effort. Each completed action reduces friction for the next one. Confidence increases, doubt loses volume, and progress starts to feel natural. What once required willpower begins to require routine. People who seem motivated are usually just riding momentum they created earlier. They didn't find it, they built it. And the moment you stop waiting and start moving, momentum will meet you where you are and carry you forward. 7 days proves you are in control because it's long enough to challenge you, but short enough that excuses lose their power. Anyone can be disciplined for a moment, and anyone can quit forever. But 7 days sits in the middle. It demands commitment without feeling impossible. It forces you to face yourself honestly and decide who's in charge, your impulses or your decisions. When you complete something for 7 consecutive days, you interrupt old patterns. You break the cycle of starting and stopping that's been quietly running your life. Each day becomes evidence that you can follow through, even when motivation fades. By the end of the week, you're no longer guessing whether you're capable. You've proven it. 7 days also creates psychological authority. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to change and start seeing yourself as someone who already has. That shift builds confidence that isn't loud or emotional, but solid and grounded. It's the kind of confidence that comes from keeping your word when no one else is watching. Most importantly, 7 days reminds you that you're not stuck. You're not broken. You're not powerless. You've just been out of practice. And practice repeated daily restores control faster than anything else. So if you've been waiting for motivation, stop waiting. Motivation isn't the starting line. It's the reward for movement. You don't need a new plan. You don't need more confidence. You don't need permission. You need one decision. Pick one small promise and keep it for 7 days straight. Not when you feel like it, not when it's convenient, but because your word matters again. Let those 7 days rebuild your trust in yourself. Let them remind you who's in control. Let them prove that change doesn't come from emotion. It comes from alignment. And when those 7 days are over, you won't be asking where your motivation went. You'll realize something far more powerful. You never needed motivation. You needed momentum. And momentum starts now.